Turkish coffee on Shabbos. Turkish coffee on Shabbos. So a lot of poskim in Israel say kli sheni is even good, lechumra kli shlishi. Now, another big giant posek tells me, I don't know what they're basing it on, because it's kalui, okay? It's finely ground roasted coffee, which means that there's bishul after that. But unlike other coffees that you can cold brew, you could have just as good a cup of coffee making it with cold water as you would with boiled water. Turkish coffee is on a league of its own, that there is no way you can cold brew coffee. Yeah, no. Turkish coffee, specifically Turkish coffee. You cold brew Turkish coffee, or are you agreeing with my question?
No, what I've done.
One second. Let me finish the question, Shlomo.
What I've done is I put it in cold water overnight in the fridge, and it does taste good. But that's not what you meant. Go ahead. It does taste very good.
So he says no. So I said, what if I experimented this time. I made Turkish coffee with cold water, let it sit. All the sediments fell. I drank it. I tasted Turkish coffee in the water. Now he says, this other person, he's looking for the source of it. He's looking for the source of what the heter is, because he compared it to a certain Spanish fish that even just washing it, you know what I'm talking about? The Spania, that even just washing it would improve it, which makes it bishul on Shabbos. So Turkish coffee, he says, is even worse than that, or just as bad as that, to make it a sul, because any amount of hot water mixed with those ground Turkish coffee would improve it, according to all opinions, like in terms of people who drink coffee. Now I said, what about if I don't mind it? Is it a matter of a personal opinion? He says, no, it's a he thinks it's about there's no way that the coffee is not improved. Even if you like it, you'll even agree that it's improved if you boil it. So that's the question. Why is it mutal according to the people? So what is the source that says it's okay?
First of all, as you correctly pointed out, before I answer the question, I must object to the whole issue from beginning to end. Because I drink Israeli coffee and not Turkish coffee. Okay. It's a matter of patriotism. Okay.
Okay, fine.
That's set aside. As far as the issue is concerned, as you correctly pointed out, Me'ikar Hadin, most poskim hold kli sheni is fine. Good chumrah, according to just about all the poskim, good chumrah would be kli shlishi. As you pointed out, that's the mainstream opinion of almost all the great poskim. The mahmir position, the very mahmir position, the extreme mahmir position, which seems to be the basis of the chumrah that you heard, is the Orach HaShulchan. The Orach HaShulchan, unlike all the other poskim, holds that it is simply prohibited to make something like Turkish coffee or even tea, brewing tea, whether they have loose tea or in a tea bag, brewing it in kli rishon, sheni, shlishi, kli 100. It doesn't matter what the kli is. It's kale habishul, something easily cooked, like those Spanish fish that the Gemara mentions, and therefore the Orach HaShulchan holds that there is no way that you can put even warm water on Turkish coffee or tea leaves, for that matter. This is a maverick opinion, a Das Yachid. He's the only one of the big name poskim who holds that way, and therefore someone who wants good advice should, of course, be advised exactly as you formulated the opinions of the great poskim. Of course, it's okay to rely upon kli shlishi for sure, and those who are doing kli sheni, we won't object to that. On the other hand, individuals out there who wish to be mahmir, and this is not something I would ever tell anyone to do, but someone who wishes on his own, someone who wishes on her own to be mahmir and follow the strictest opinion of the Orach HaShulchan, I will not mock that person. I will not laugh at that person. There is such an opinion.
No, so the question is, the question is, the people who say that it's okay to, you don't need to prepare essence of tea before Shabbos. You can go with
Do it
your
in cliche,
whatever.
cliche for sure.
No, whatever. But according to those, for the specific category of Turkish coffee, which doesn't seem to, people who are connoisseurs of coffee, they say Turkish coffee is not something that you can cold brew. It's a category of its own. It's like that Spanish fish. So how would those poskim that are materet, how do they handle that question? What is their view on this Turkish coffee that they don't have the problem of the Aruch Shulchan?
As the Romans used to say, de gustibus non est disputandum. Oh, the younger generation doesn't learn Latin anymore. Al ta'am ve'al reach ein litvakeach. I'll give you an example, and then you'll understand how to apply it in this case. Yayin mevushal, assuming it was kosher at the time it was cooked, is immune to non-Jewish handling.
Right.
This is well established in the Gemara and all the poskim. Now, what about pasteurization? Pasteurization is around 80 degrees, not actually boiling, but over Yad Soleted bow. Many poskim hold that pasteurization has the status of bishul. Why? Because it's over Yad Soledet bo, and b'chol haTorah kula, heating something to that temperature is called bishul, and therefore that should be bishul as far as yayin is concerned. And as all the Rishonim say, if you cook wine, it degrades the taste. And pasteurization also degrades the taste. And therefore, pasteurization has the status of bishul. That's what many poskim say. On the other hand, many other poskim say pasteurization does not change the taste at all. No one can tell the difference between pasteurized wine and unpasteurized wine. Rav Elyashiv even said that he asked wine experts this question, and they all assured him that no one can tell the difference between pasteurized wine and raw wine. It all tastes the same. Now, I can't for the life of me imagine where he found these wine experts who told him that. You know, maybe it was his next door neighbor who likes wine or something. I don't know. But, you know, it seems to me, my taste tells me that anyone can tell the difference between pasteurized wine and unpasteurized wine. And indeed, there's a reason why only the cheaper wines are pasteurized and the finer wines are not pasteurized. No winery would dream of pasteurizing its finer wines. You just ruin it. Footnote F12, to open up the footnote window for a moment. This was one of the few mistakes that Julia Child made. Julia Child, you don't remember Julia Child? Julia Child taught a whole generation of people how to cook. Vehi haita omeret, she used to say that when you're adding wine to the beef bourguignon, the wine should be good enough to drink. That don't add wine to the food which you wouldn't drink. She was wrong. Cooking degrades the wine horribly, and although wine is terribly important in cooking, there's no reason to spend money on an expensive wine for cooking. Well, once it gets cooked, the taste is going to be degraded anyway. End of footnote. Control F12 to toggle back to the main program. Now, my point is that people disagree about taste. Rav Elyashiv said a number of times, he published a number of times, that Israeli Gvina Tzuhuba has a very strong taste, and therefore you have to wait, Ashkenazim have to wait 6 hours before eating meat after Israeli Gvina Tzuhuba. Poskim from Chutz La'aretz say Israeli Gvina Tzuhuba hardly has any taste at all. I remember not so long ago, Youngsters might find this hard to believe, but in my lifespan, even not so long ago, I remember when the first Mahadran Gavina Tsuhuba came on the market. My mother-in-law was visiting from Europe, and I said, hey, here, taste it. We have two brands, one with Agudat Yisrael and one with Eidah Haretit. Taste them and tell me what you think of it. And she tastes the two cheeses and said, this one tastes a little bit like cheese.
Okay, but we're goleshing here. That was
some people are more sensitive to taste.
Close the footnote.
Rav Yoshev apparently not. Rav Yoshev apparently was not very sensitive to taste.
But hold on, just if you're bringing up the cheese, isn't it a matter of does it take 6 months to whatever?
It's another criteria. It's another criterion, but the taste also, according to some Rishonim, was a criterion.
If it's a sharp taste or not a sharp taste.
Sharp taste.
But bring it back to Turkish coffee.
The point is, as far as Turkish coffee is concerned, different rabbis are going to disagree about whether or not proper brewing improves the taste, whether the taste is better than cold brewed. A simple person like me, give me a double-blind test, I'm confident that I could tell you instantly which is which. On the other hand, the other people would never know which is which. Those who are sensitive to the difference might be led to the Chumrah position.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
Are you saying for Turkish coffee that you're talking that it's say hi? Yeah. You're saying that it's allowed to be made as normal, but normal is with the kli shlishi, or are you saying you can pour the hot water directly onto
kli shlishi? No, kli shlishi. Put the good advice is to put the Turkish coffee into kli shlishi. Those who are putting it into kli sheni, I would not tell them to stop their practice.
Can you explain that?
You just let it settle, or you use a French press?
I just let it settle. But can you explain the kli sheni? Because I the Sephardic brothers and sisters said that Maran Vadia or Rav Vadia said something about that you can put it in the kli sheni and let the boiling water on the urn go right over it.
Correct. So, Kalei Bishul.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Kalei Bishul, the Spanish fish that we mentioned, which are very easily cooked. There's some category of things which are Kalei Bishul, very easily cooked, and you're not allowed to prepare them even in kli sheni. Exactly what falls into that category is not perfectly clear. The Mishnah Brura says, since we don't have a clear definition of what falls into the category of kal habishul, we have to suspect that anything might be kal habishul, and therefore we shouldn't put anything into kli sheni, always kli shlishi. Many poskim hold that the ordinary things that we make today, including coffee and tea, are not kal habishul, therefore kli sheni is fine.
Wow. Okay, that's the position. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So since it's a simple chumrah to be machmir and use kli shlishi, that's good to recommend, but not absolutely essential.
It makes sense. So it's not to do with the roasting of the coffee?
Yeah. No, this is yesh bishul acher kliya, something which has been baked still has a prohibition to cook it. Something which has been cooked still has a prohibition to bake it. Going between roasting and boiling, roasting. Frying in oil has the same status as boiling. Frying, what we call frying in oil, is really boiling in oil.
Oh, okay.
And therefore, something which has been fried can be subsequently boiled, or something which has been boiled can be subsequently fried. Halachically, frying and boiling are the same because you're just using hot oil. Wow. Okay. Are there any other issues that we should talk about before we turn to ice?
Yes. Mordechai had something.
Oh.
He's saying hi.
Yeah, what he's saying, he needs his diaper changed?
Yeah, I wanted to ask something really different than cooking. But I saw a movie, an Israeli movie the other day.
No, and you don't watch movies.
Yeah, well, I'm confessing. And the Jewish Israeli actor, his role was to be a Greek Orthodox young man, and he wore a cross for the part. What would, like if he had?
If you meet him, in live, you can stone him. And if you're going to meet him on Shabbos, you have to prepare the stones in advance before Shabbos, because stones are muktzah, and therefore, if you want to throw stones at him on Shabbos, you have to prepare the stones in advance. That would be the proper punishment. But let's talk about the crucifix, the cross. Rav Uziel, who was the Rav Rashi back in the Rishon LeZion, back in the days of.
Sorry, just a clarification.
Yeah.
Clarification: is the stoning because of the crucifix or because he's acting in the movie?
Both. Either.
Oh my
would
gosh!
Be enough. Either would be enough. Now Rav Uziel, before the founding of the state, he was the Rishon LeZion, and he continued with the founding of the state together with Rav Kook. They were the Sephardi and the Ashkenazi chief rabbis. Back in the Mandate period, he received some high honor from the British monarchy, and he was granted a special cross that he could wear, which was a big thing, a thing of great honor. And he was photographed a number of times. I'm sure that on Google Images you can find images of Rav Uziel wearing his cross, and subsequent poskim, led by Rav Ovadia Yosef, take that as evidence that a cross which is not connected to Christian worship, but rather is merely an artifact of jewelry or a medallion of honor, but not connected with their religion, there's no particular prohibition to wear. So I assume that in the movie they did not go to some Greek Orthodox priest and get the crucifix from around his neck and used it in the movie. I'm sure they just used a prop which they bought in some jewelry store, I suppose.
I'm glad I asked. Very interesting and unexpected teshuvah.
So,
So,
may I ask a question?
sure.
May I ask a question, please? So,
Yes.
in connection to that, somebody who is touring Europe and wants to see Michelangelo's paintings, can he enter a church and look up the ceiling and see the painting, even though it's in the church, but it's an art piece of Michelangelo's?
Well, of course, the whole question is wrong, because you should just stay in Eretz Israel. There's no reason to set foot outside of Eretz Israel just to look at some paint on the ceiling.
Really?
But for a Jew who's already there, the answer to the question is based on a Mishnah in Masechet Avodah Zarah. The Mishnah in Masechet Avodah Zarah says it's prohibited to walk along a road which leads to a city where they have an idolatrous festival, because people who see you walking on the road towards the city with the idolatrous festival, people will think that you're going there to participate in it, and that's Maris Ayin, that's prohibited. If, on the other hand, not everyone in the city is participating in the idolatrous festival, some people do, some people don't, there are multiple religions in the city. If it's not the whole city which is participating in the idolatrous festival, then you are allowed to walk along the road going to that city, and anyone who sees you will have to judge you l'kaf schus, will have to assume that, of course, you're going for other reasons, not to join the festival. Now, as far as churches and other places of non-Jewish worship are concerned, if going into that building, whether it's a Christian church or some other religion, if going into it gives the impression to onlookers that you're going in to participate in their worship, that's Maris Ayin, even though you're just going in to look at the paint on the ceiling. On the other hand, if it's clear to onlookers that you're not going in for religious purposes, for example, anyone who sees you will know you're part of a group of tourists. They have their phones taking pictures, and they're being led by a tour director, or it's a class from architectural school, and all the students have their clipboards and they're making notes, and the professor is explaining this and that. If you enter in a way that is apparent to onlookers that you're a tourist or an architecture student or an art history student or whatever it is, it all depends upon the impression you'll make on onlookers. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Do we have other issues before we turn to ice? Okay.
Even with a kippah on, you can look like a tourist onlooker with a clipboard and whatnot, and then it becomes okay. But even with a kippah, or should it be taken off?
Correct. I see no reason why you should take the kippah off, unless of course you're in a place where there's anti-Semitic agitation, in which case you speak French. French has two words, pogrom and ratonnade. They both mean exactly the same thing, except pogrom has to do with attacks against the Jews, and ratonnade has to do with attacks against the Arabs. They're two separate words, depending upon who's being attacked. I'll call my name. We're ready to turn to ice.
What was the Arab word? Sorry?
The French, it's French.
So
the word in French.
What was the word about the Arabs?
Ratonnade. Ratonnade is a pogrom, but not against Jews, against Arabs.
Against Arabs. Thanks.
During the Algerian Revolution, the French Foreign Legion in Algeria during the Algerian Revolution, the French used to call the Algerians ratons. Which was a slur, a derogatory expression. They are rats, raton. And in France today, ratonnade is an attack against the rats. But the word has lost its pejorative, its derogatory meaning. The word can be used in polite society, ratonnade, an attack against the Arabs. Okay, let me get ice on the screen. Oh, I'm so good at this now. First, Gemara and Shabbos. Mirazkim, very strange word, which appears in no other context. Lo et hashelik v'lo et habarad b'Shabbos. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to mirakez, whatever that means. You're not allowed to mirakez snow or sleet. Bishvil sheyazuvu meimav, you're not allowed to change snow or sleet into water. Aval notenhu letoch kos o letoch ke'ara, but you can put the snow or the sleet in a cup or in a bowl. Ve'eno choshesh, you don't have to worry if it's going to melt. So apparently you can't do anything actively to get the snow to melt, but if you put it in a bowl or a glass and it melts by itself, all is well. Rashi explains this word mirazkin means the same as the ordinary word miraskin. That is, to use your hands to mash it up, break it up into smaller pieces, and it will melt quicker. You're not allowed to use your hands, ma'aseh yadayim, to do anything to make the snow melt. Mishum teka molid b'Shabbos. The reason it's prohibited is because you are giving birth, molid, giving birth, creating something new on Shabbos. Before Shabbos, it was snow or ice. Now you're making something new, water. Now, we all know that the molecules in ice are exactly the same as the molecules in water. The only difference between them is ice. The molecules are organized in a crystal structure, and therefore it's solid. And in water, the molecules are arranged amorphously, which is why it's a liquid. We know that from the chemical point of ice and water are identical, but from the halachic point of view, they have different identities. And before Shabbos, there was ice. Now you're making a new thing, water, which had not existed before Shabbos. It's as though you're creating the water out of the ice. You're changing state. You're changing from a solid state to a liquid state. That is prohibited on Shabbos. And we're going to see how this applies to fat, which is congealed. On food, you have a food with congealed butter in it in the refrigerator, or something fleischig with congealed fat on it in the refrigerator. We'll see how all this applies to melting the butter or melting the fat. We'll get to that as well. If, on the other hand, you put the snow or the ice into a cup, they mean you put it into a cup of wine, and in the wine it will melt. Even though it melts by itself, there's no reason to be concerned. According to Rashi, and all the great poskim follow him on this, the leniency of letting the ice melt by itself or letting the snow melt by itself is if the snow or the ice has been put into a liquid like wine, and then it will melt, and the runoff, the water which comes from the ice, will mix with the liquid which is already there. According to this, and all the posts can follow this idea, if you take an ice cube from the freezer, you should not put it in a bowl, all by itself in a bowl, or all by itself in a glass, and then it'll melt into water. That's creating water. But you can take exactly the same ice cube and put it into a glass of water, and now the water which melts from the ice cube will mix with the water or other liquid that was already in the cup. It all has to do with what is nikar, what is noticeable. If you see the if you see the water standing by itself, who created the water, and that's prohibited.
So you shouldn't actually do it. Sorry. So you shouldn't actually do that at all. It's not okay to do it and then just not use the water or leave the water if it melts. You shouldn't actually.
Correct. You shouldn't do it. You should not put the ice cube into a glass by itself or into a bowl by itself.
And is that included in what most poskim hold? When you said most poskim hold about that?
We'll come to this in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
According to Rambam, Kvasim Shlakot Schatan, Rambam talks about the prohibition of squeezing juice out of fruits and vegetables. Im l'rakech kufam, if the reason you're squeezing the fruit or vegetable is to soften it, a banana which you want to soften to feed to a baby, mutter, that's fine. Lahotzi mehen also, if the reason you're squeezing it is not to soften it, for example, to feed it to a baby, but to get the juice out of it, prohibited. Oh, so squeezing fruit or vegetable to get the juice out is a prohibition on Shabbos. That's the prohibition of schita. Ein meraskin et hasheleg sheyazuvu meimav, and according to Rambam, the prohibition of melting snow is similar to the prohibition of squeezing fruits and vegetables to get the liquid out. Mirasekhu letoch ke'ara o letoch hakos. And therefore, according to Rambam, the prohibition is doing something with your hands to make the snow or ice melt. Letting it melt by itself is okay. Now here we have a little bit of a disagreement, a tiny disagreement between Rashi and Rambam. If you take the ice cube from the freezer and just put it on a plate, in a bowl, in a glass, Rashi says you shouldn't have done that because it's going to melt and you're going to see the water. According to the Rambam, well, it's just going to melt by itself. You didn't do anything to smash it, mash it. You didn't do anything. If it's snow, you didn't stir it to get it to melt faster, and all is well. Therefore, the contemporary poskim say, if you take the ice cubes out of the freezer, you can put them in a bowl on the table. The people eating around the table can then take the ice cubes and put into their glasses. That's fine. But any water which is remaining in the bottom of the bowl is muktzah, because that is runoff from the ice, and there was no water there previously. If you would put some water in the bowl and then add to it ice cubes from the freezer, now people could still take their ice cubes, and any melt-off which remains in the bottom of the bowl would be permitted, because it's not omed bifnei atzmo and not nikar bifnei atzmo. These are the basic principles. Let's take these basic principles and see how they play out in the Shulchan Aruch and the poskim. The Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch says, Kidera sheyesh ba rotev shenikrash. You have some kind of food, and the rotev has solidified, butter in it, and it's room temperature or cold, and the butter is solidified, or it's something fleischig, and the fat in it has solidified. Kishahashuman nimoach eino ba'en. If when the butter melts or the fat melts, if it's not ba'en by itself, if it's not omed bifnei atzmo v'nikar bifnei atzmo, if it just joins other liquids which are there, and therefore it's mixed with other liquids, shari, that's fine. Yesh machmirim. Some people are strict. Nahagul hachmir. And the minig is to be strict. Mihu b'makom tzorach yesh l'smoch asma rishonim, but where needed, one can rely upon the lenient opinion. The Ramah has done his best to confuse us. And Ramah is pretty good at that. Well, he begins by saying that as long as the melt-off from the butter or the fat or the ice or the snow is not me'ain, omed bifnei atzmo, nikar bifnei atzmo, standing by itself so you can see it, rather it's joined together, it's mixed together, dissolved together with other liquids, all is well. Some people refrain from this. If there's need, of course you can rely upon the lenient opinion. Well, bottom line, it turns out that if someone asks advice, good advice would be, unless you have some good reason, don't do anything which will melt the fat or the butter which is mixed in the food. If you have a good reason, I don't want to serve this food cold, I want to serve it warm. If you have a good reason, then one can definitely rely upon the lenient opinion, as long as the melt-off from the butter, the congealed fat, the ice, whatever it is, as long as the melt-off is not standing by itself, so you see it by itself. Now we have the contemporary poskim. The Baruch says, Mutar liten empanada. Spanish or South American cuisine? Empanada. Yes, well, now you see how to spell, how the Shulchan Aruch spells empanada. It has the yud in it, because without the yud, people would say empanada. Well, it's not an empanada, it's an empanada. So he added the yud, so you should know how to pronounce it correctly. Now, what filling do we have in the empanada? Well, it's a filling which has in it maybe congealed butter, maybe congealed fat, whatever it is. You can warm it up. Kineged ha'esh b'makom sheyad soleted bo. It's okay to heat it up, even in a place where it's going to get very hot. Even though the fat, or maybe it's butter, whatever's in there is going to melt because you're putting it next to the fire and it's going to get hot there. It's okay. Why is it okay? Because the melted fat in the empanada is not going to be standing by itself, not going to be nikar by itself. Shulchan Aruch further says, sheleg v'barad, ice and snow. You're not allowed to use your hands to stir it, to mash it, to smash it in order to make it melt. You're not allowed to crush it or do anything which will make it melt faster. But you can put the ice or the snow into a glass or a cup or a bowl which has other liquid already in it. According to the Machaber, according to the Sephardic poskim, the melt-off from ice is permitted. As I mentioned earlier, the melt-off from ice, if it's standing by itself, there was no other liquid there. When you put the ice in the bowl, according to Ashkenaz poskim, the runoff, the melt-off is muktzah. The Magen Avram, one of the two principal commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, says, Al isu litain empanada keneged aish. As far as putting it, he never saw an empanada in his life, right? He lived in Poland, but he understood the idea of an empanada. As far as the Shulchan Aruch's leniency, to put it next to the fire at a place where it's going to get very hot, Mishum da shuman tzaf lamala v'have be'en v'have nolad dedami lamashkin shezavu. If the fat is going to be if the melted fat is going to be standing by itself and observable by itself, asur. If it's not going to be observable by itself, permissible. And that's exactly the conclusion of the Mishnah Brura as well. Okay, all of this is background. Now, let us turn to the Acharonim. First, what about taking water and putting it in the freezer in order to freeze it? Up to this point, all the sources spoke about going from frozen to melted. No one in the sources speaks about the other direction, freezing a liquid. After all, in those days, they didn't have freezers, and therefore it was not an issue in those days. Well, let's see what the contemporary poskim have to say about freezing water to make ice cubes or anything which is conceptually similar. Lo nireli lesor. I don't think it's right, he says, to prohibit making ice cubes or even putting sugar and flavors in it and making popsicles for children. I don't think it's right to prohibit. Why not? Chada, first of all, lasot mima'achal mashke ika gezeres schita. Changing from solid to liquid, we have a specific rabbinic prohibition. It's in some sense similar to squeezing olives, to squeezing grapes, which is a Torah prohibition on Shabbos. So since it's in some sense similar, Chazal made a specific prohibition to melt the ice. Because melting ice is in some sense parallel to squeezing fruits and vegetables. Going the other direction, from liquid to solid, lo shaycha gezerah. There's no reason for the rabbinic prohibition to apply. After all, the rabbinic prohibition had to do with similarity to getting liquid out of fruits and vegetables. Well, it has absolutely nothing to do with the opposite direction. You are in no sense getting liquid out of solids when you freeze the ice cubes. That's the first reason why he thinks there's no place to prohibit making ice cubes on Shabbos. Ode. Second reason. Afilu im netpost risuk shelet eno sheleg eno nesa elaborasum yudayim. Even if you hold, like the Rambam, that the only prohibition of melting ice and snow is using your hands to crush it, to smash it, to stir it. But even those poskim hold just leaving the ice in a bowl by itself is not prohibited. Drinking the water that comes from it is a machlokas, but just putting the ice in a bowl and letting it melt by itself, everyone agrees is permitted because you didn't do anything to smash it, crush it, stir it to speed up the melting. It's permitted to add sugar to coffee. It's permitted to add salt to soup. What does this have to do with the issue? Well, what you and I call dissolving, we say we dissolve the sugar in the coffee, we dissolve the salt in the soup. He says that's melting, going from solid to liquid. And conceptually, that's exactly what dissolving is. You're going from solid to liquid, and no one ever prohibited that. Everyone always thought it's okay to put sugar in your coffee and salt into the soup. Well, that's a second reason why in the direction from solid to, that's another reason why going from liquid to solid should be permitted. It just is something which is, you're not doing anything with your hands to freeze it. The freezer is doing the job. Im ken gam kan, hare osa kerach biadayim, ella osa pu'ula sheyitkarer ha'avir va'avir hakar osa kerach. When you put the water in the freezer, you're not doing anything with your fingers, with your hands to freeze it. You're just putting it in the freezer, then the freezer makes the cold air, and the cold air freezes the ice cubes. It's all happening by itself. Just like it's permissible to take the ice out of the freezer and it will melt by itself, similarly, it's permitted to put the water in the freezer and it will congeal, it will freeze by itself. Bottom line, the Maharshag at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, when refrigeration first was introduced. Refrigeration is an Australian technological development. Our Australian participants should be proud of that. Australia, back in the late 19th century, was, and still is today, a big exporter of meat. Back in the 19th century, export of meat from Australia, which was a major industry there, still is a major industry. But back then, all the meat had to be salted, and it could be exported only preserved as salted meat. Therefore, Australian engineers pioneered refrigeration so that the meat could be exported refrigerated or frozen rather than cured, salt cured. Marshag is lenient. Now let's take a look at the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner from Bnei Brak, late 20th century. L'rov HaRishonim ein isa nolad b'asiyas kerach. Most poskim, we don't see any reason to prohibit making ice. Sefer HaTruma lo baruch lam. Sefer HaTruma is hard to understand what the Sefer HaTruma is talking about. Some people might understand the Sefer HaTruma as providing a source for prohibiting making ice, maybe. Ulai dafka nolad shel keresh naset solul v'lo nase mitzol nikrash. It's hard to understand the words of the Truma, of the Sefer HaTruma. Solul means liquid, nikrash means solid, Exactly what he's talking about, making liquid solid, solid liquid, is not at all clear. But since it's possible to understand the Sefer HaTruma as prohibiting the solidification of melted butter, the solidification of water into ice, since it's possible to understand the Sefer HaTruma in that way, I think you should not do it. All of this is in a place where you have no reason, you have no need for the ice. If you really don't need the ice, why not be mahmir and choshesh for the possibility that the Sefer HaTruma prohibits making ice? But if you have a reason why you need the ice, it's going to be a hot day, and you want to use the ice to cool the beverages that you serve at the table, it's obvious that you can be lenient and follow the vast majority of all the poskim, except for the Sefer HaTruma, whose real meaning is a little bit obscure and not clear at all. Well, as far as the earlier poskim are concerned, we see general agreement that it's okay to make ice. Some room to be machmir, some tiny room to be machmir, if you really don't have any good reason why you want the ice. Now, Shmirat Shabbat Gilchata, surely the most popular handbook of Hilchot Shabbat, says Tov l'himana milatet b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov mayim l'toch tahakpa'ah. Tov, it's good to avoid putting water into the freezer to make ice cubes. It's good. Well, that's another way of saying it's not prohibited. Why is it good to refrain from making ice, even though it's not prohibited? Surely he has in mind this idea of the Sefer HaTruma, which could be understood as prohibiting solidification on Shabbos. So if you want to make kubiot, kerach, ice cubes, don't do it. Ela im kein yesh tzorach godol. He's added the word godol according to the Shevet HaLevi. Any good reason is good enough. According to the Sefer Shmir Shabbos Gilchasa, you need a tzorach godol, a very good reason. I don't know exactly what the difference is between them, but of course, people will disagree about what is tzorach and what is tzorach godol. In any event, mutar latet mayim letak ba'as samuch l'kenisas v'Shabbos. It's perfectly acceptable to put the water in the freezer shortly before the beginning of Shabbos or Yom Tov, as long as it's before Shkia, before sunset. At sunset, it's still water. It hasn't had time to freeze yet, but it will change into ice on Shabbos and Yom Tov. That's perfectly acceptable because that's just happening by itself. Gam mutar leachnis mayim b'Shabbos uv'chag l'takpa'a al manat l'kara'am ul'hotzi'am l'fnei sheyukpa'u. Similarly, if you want to put water in the freezer to cool it quickly, but you want to still serve it or drink it as water, and you're intending to take it out of the freezer before it freezes because you want something cold to drink or you want to serve something cold to drink, that's perfectly acceptable. If you become distracted and it does freeze, well, that just happens by itself. In his footnote, he quotes Dovev Misharim. Dovev Misharim was the Chibina Rebbe, the Chibina Rav, one of the great Hasidic poskim. Rav Weidenfeld was his name. Originally from Chabin in Lithuania. After the Holocaust, he lived here in Yerushalayim. He flat out prohibits making ice on Shabbos. There is such an opinion, surely because he's concerned with the Sefer HaTruma. But Shamati me'agon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal. But Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach told me, and we know that the bulk of Sefer Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata is based on the teachings of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and we know that Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach wrote in his Haskama, in his approval of the book, that he read everything in the book very carefully. So we know that when Reb Shlomo Zalman is being quoted in the book, we know that he read this passage and approved of the quotation, unlike so many of the Svarim that quote the opinions of so many Rabbanim. And I'm a little bit nervous about whether the quotations are correct, because I know of so many examples of different Svarim which quote the same great rabbi as saying opposite things. In this case, we know definitively that the quotation is legit. Mekevan shemivua b'simen shin kaf, since it says in the Shulchan Aruch, shemutar lishboa kerach b'kad shel mayim shenikrash kidei litol mayim mitachtav v'lo nizkar sham she'im nikrash b'Shabbos yeh aser mishum nolad. It says in the Shulchan Aruch flat out that if you have a layer of ice on top of a bowl of water, you have a layer of ice on top of a bowl of water, and you want to get the water out, Shulchan Aruch says flat out, you can smash the ice in order to get the water out from under the layer of ice. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says nothing about whether the layer of ice froze before Shabbos or on Shabbos, and therefore we learn that there's no halachic difference between ice which froze before Shabbos or after Shabbos. And therefore, the leniency, if you have some use for using ice, no problem at all. The final opinion we want to look at is at Tzitz Eliezer. We've met him many times. I've quoted only certain paragraphs from his tshuvot. Are very long. All his tshuvot are very long. He was incapable of writing short tshuvot, rather like Rav Yosef, who was also incapable of writing short tshuvot for very different reasons. Rav Ovadia had a methodology according to the Derech HaPsak, according to the methodology of Rav Ovadia Yosef. One cannot come to a halacha conclusion until one has surveyed all that has been written about the subject. And therefore, any tshuva is necessarily encyclopedic because it has to deal with everything that has ever been said on the subject before reaching a conclusion. So his tshuvas are all very long. Tzitz Eliezer also has very long tshuvas, but for a different reason. He holds that the only way to reach a decision is to understand the historical development of the halacha, beginning with the sources in the Pasuk, in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, in the Gaonim, wherever the source is. You have to begin with the source and then trace down generation by generation to see how the halacha was understood, generation after generation. And then once you've been able to delineate the direction of thought that the great poskim had through the generations, you just place yourself in alignment as the most recent link in that line of thought, and you have the correct halacha. So for very different reasons, his tshuvot are also very encyclopedic. Shmuel, you have a question?
Yeah, excuse me for maybe it's a silly question. I don't think I got the difference between the two. I gathered that both of them are gathering the entirety of, and then it seems like you're saying different things, but I didn't catch what.
For different reasons. Tzitz Eliezer wants the historical structure of the halacha so he can place himself in line as the most recent link. The Rav Ovadia is not so interested in the direction of development. He's more interested in understanding what everyone has said and then drawing his conclusion. And his conclusion will usually be drawn on the basis of majority views. Okay, here's what the Tzitz Eliezer says. Hakpa'ah na'asit b'mekare b'ma'achalim u'mashkim nechshav k'ma'aseh na'aseh alehem. When things freeze either by putting them in the refrigerator or the freezer. Different things have different freezing temperatures. Well, halachically, that just happens by itself. Ein kan mishum molid. There's no prohibition of molid, creating something new by congealing or freezing something. Even that Sefer HaTruma, which is somewhat ambiguous. Le'asor mishum nolad yesh l'hatil etzorach, even according to him, for example, oneg Shabbos, in order to enjoy Shabbos more by having ice cubes. Even according to the Sefer HaTruma, there's no reason to be machmir. According to the Rishonim and the Poskim, who hold that the foundation of the prohibition in snow and ice is similar to squeezing fruits and vegetables, well, according to that, there's surely no prohibition in making ice, because solidifying a liquid is in no sense related to squeezing a solid fruit or vegetable to get the liquid out. Further, he says, why is it that so many people have no problem in taking food out of the refrigerator or out of the freezer where butter, fat, other congealed substances are going to melt on Shabbos? Why is everyone doing this? מקרישתן, כשנפשרו הרי חל עליהם לכאורה לדעת בעל התרומה והמחמירם כבעשה שם נולד. Why are people doing that even though there's clear room to prohibit it? צריכים להיות אז אסורים. One would think that there's good reason to follow the strict opinion and not allow congealed substances taken from the freezer or refrigerator to melt on Shabbos. Ein kol isur b'hakrashat rotev, although there's good reason to be stricter than the common practice and prohibit melting congealed substances, freezing things is surely okay. Making ice on Shabbos, some people might say, is a prohibition of bona. Biot megushe kerach mitkayamim binyanam liyom o yoter. After all, it is the reason it is prohibited to make cheese on Shabbos is because of the prohibition of bona. Take a glass of milk, squeeze some drops of lemon juice into the glass of milk, and more or less instantly, the milk is going to congeal. That is bona. Taking separate things and sticking them together, taking separate bricks and sticking them together to make a wall, taking disparate elements of the milk and sticking them together to make congealed milk, cheese, in other words, that's bona. ואפילו אם נתעקש ולומר דאין בזה משום bona, יש מכלל מקום לחייב משום מכה בפטיש. Well, maybe making ice can fall under the prohibition of bona, taking just like making cheese out of milk. Maybe it could be classified as maka b'patish, doing the final thing you need to make something useful. Mishum srach malacha kishiyadei adam misayin. Therefore, bottom line, I recommend against making ice on Shabbos, even though he just proved to us based on all the sources that it's permitted. Nonetheless, it could conceptually be categorized under the rubric of bona, like making cheese, making a solid out of a liquid. It could conceptually be categorized under the rubric of mak b'patish, doing the last thing necessary to make a useful item, and therefore he is the strict posek who prohibits it. Bottom line, we've seen the mainstream poskim who are lenient, and the reason why some poskim recommend being strict. So that's enough for ice at the moment. I'm going to pause with that and ask you if you have any questions you want to deal with now.
Shalom, Toda Rabbah. The idea of putting ice into a bowl without that little bit of water, let's say you're not in charge of doing that, is it is that b'diavad, and might as well put a little bit of water in there, but if it didn't happen, what should you do, or is it okay?
You should avoid drinking the water, but the ice cubes you can still take out and use.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other issues now?
Philip?
Yes, Philip.
You touched on the concept of molad or nolad with the creation of water on Shabbos by melting, or vice versa, according to some. To me, like the paradigm of nolad is in Masechet Beitza when an egg is laid on Shabbos. So there's two things that were mentioned that the Rav mentioned was if it's nicker or if it happened by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now the egg laying happened by itself and still it's asur.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So
the two separate concepts of nolad. As far as the egg in Maseches Beitza is concerned, the only question is whether it's muktzah or not. But there's a whole different question, a different issue. The same word is used, nolad, for a different issue, whether you can make something. Of course, we don't make our own eggs. The chickens lay the eggs. But can we make something new? That's a question having to do with the action of making something new. That's what we're talking about today. The first chapter of Beitza deals with the question of muktzah based on something which just happened naturally. For example, the branch fell off the tree, or the fruit fell off the tree on Shabbos. That fruit is
muktzah. Okay,
the water drips out of the air conditioner on Shabbos. That water is muktzah.
So what's the difference between that water and the melted water? That happened by itself too.
Right. And therefore, most poskim indeed hold that if you put ice cubes in a dry bowl, the melt off is indeed muktzah. But if you put the ice cubes in a bowl where there already is some water, the melt off mixes with the water and is not nikar and all is well.
So that's the other thing I don't understand. So why does nikar make a difference to the equation?
Yeah, because we're talking about an Isur d'Rabbanan, and the Isur d'Rabbanan, all Isurim of d'Rabbanan apply to only things which are visible to natural vision.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. That's Isur d'Rabbanan.
Right.
Okay, Scott.
Okay. Tov, b'hatzlacha.
Have you got a minute for an unrelated question?
Yes, Jody.
Thank you. Why, when a woman toivels, does she toivel and then make a bracha and then toivel? Why doesn't she make a bracha and then toivel?
You mean even though she's not a convert?
Correct.
Yes, even though she's not a convert to Judaism, because when converts convert to Judaism, they cannot make the bracha prior to immersion because they're not Jewish yet, and therefore they have to make the bracha after coming out of the mikveh because now they're Jewish, and since that is the case with in conversion, in order to make a standard practice for everyone, that's what women do after the mikveh as well.
Oh, it means, okay. So is there anybody that holds that you don't toivel and then hold on. Hang on a second, but
no one holds you should make the bracha first, but someone who did it, not in a conversion situation, someone who did it in the ordinary case is b'diavad is yotze.
Not a problem. Okay. So the reason we toivel first and then make a bracha is because of the convert.
Because of conversion, right.
Amazing. Okay, fantastic. And nobody holds that you do it the other way.
And you'll notice in passing that the people we want to refrain from confusing are the converts. It's the converts who we want to avoid confusing. If the converts know that women always make the bracha first, then the convert is just going to want to follow what he or she sees is the normal procedure. In order to avoid confusing the converts, all women always do it this way.
Okay, it's very interesting. And when you
No, I lost the last thing you said. No, I think we lost you entirely. Okay, we'll pick it up again next week. I wish you a good week and a peaceful week.
Are you able to take a good Shabbos? Or am I able to ask a few more questions or?
Oh, sure, go for it. Maybe Jody will recover her connection.
I wanted to go back to the Nolad situation. We have you're talking about lemon juice. I've heard this idea of lemon juice onto solid, like squeezing it onto solids and onto liquids, and I don't quite understand. I see some people put like a little bit of salt down and then they'll squeeze the lemon juice onto the salt, so it's onto a solid, and then they'll use it for a liquid.
It's the same idea as we mentioned before. Squeezing lemon juice into a glass all by itself, that's prohibited. But if the lemon juice is not going to be be'ain, it's not going to be standing by itself and noticeable by itself, it's going to just be mixed together with the salad or the fish or whatever you're squeezing it on, or the sugar cube that you squeeze it into. If it's not going to be omed bifnei atzmo v'nikar bifnei atzmo, then that eliminates the issur of shchita.
So if there's a little bit of salt, but you squeeze the lemon juice on it and you can see the lemon juice, then it's not going to do any good.
Yeah, in my opinion, it doesn't help very much.
Wow.
It doesn't help very much. But there are poskim who permit that. The poskim who permit that, even though it's just a little bit of salt or a little bit of sugar and a lot of lemon juice, and they're the same ones who will permit milking a cow on Shabbos. If you put just a little bit of something in the bottom of the bucket, they used to use buckets, right, for milking cows. Just put a little bit of something in the bottom of the bucket, and then the initial drops of milk will fall onto that. This is rejected by most of the poskim. Most of the poskim hold that the milk just has to be thrown out and you can't use it. But the lenient poskim hold, as long as there's something in the bottom of the bucket, all is well.
Wow. So then what, but why not? Why can't you squeeze lemon juice into a bit of water or something that's not going to be, you're not going to notice the color, let's say. I don't know if that's it.
It's the same leniency, even if the color changes.
So you can squeeze lemon juice into water on Shabbat?
According to this lenient opinion, yes.
Oh, that's according to the lenient opinion about the milk.
Right.
The cow's milk. Oh, so it's very much not accepted, but it exists. Better to put it onto something solid. I still don't understand why the solid versus liquid, why it's so much better. Because it still gets, it's not nikar. It's just like liquid just kind of mixes.
Right. You're right.
No, I don't want to take the opinion that's
Okay.
not.
Okay. I'm too lazy to squeeze lemons. I just buy lemon juice in a bottle. I'm too lazy to grate lemon zest. I just use sumac instead.
I thought the lemon juice in the bottle is much less fresh, and there's a big difference.
On the contrary, if you get a good brand, it's fresher than any fresh lemon you can buy in the store.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking about an hour 15 minutes from plucking to in the bottle.
Oh, and then it's held tight.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But buy a good brand without preservative junk in it, and then it tastes good.
Wow. Okay, Shikora, this is new.
Frozen vegetables are so much fresher than any vegetable you can buy in the shuk. like it's 3 months old, but it's fresher.
Wow. That's a great flip of the perspective.
Okay.
Last Nolad question. If one wanted to put butter into coffee, you made your Turkish coffee according to the opinions, it's okay, and then you took your
butter?
Butter.
Cream can be churned into butter, but it's an irreversible process. Putting butter into the coffee, it's not going to turn back into cream.
Correct. So I noticed you have a problem with the content of the question, not the halacha.
Yeah, okay. Okay. But putting congealed butter into coffee is, as long as it melts and joins the coffee, you're okay.
Wow. Because it's going from solid to liquid,
But it's joining the liquid that's already there.
But in the case of the squeezing the lemon, it's going from liquid to solid, like liquid onto a solid. And so it's becoming less noticeable that way.
And therefore, there should be enough solid to absorb all the drops.
Aha.
Squeezing it onto the fish or into the salad.
And is tahina considered a solid or a liquid with regards to lemon?
What an interesting question. Halachically speaking, it's just like Mrs. Cohen taught us in the 3rd grade, something which can be poured from container to container is a liquid. So it depends on the tahina.
So, but if it's in that state between the solid, I know that that's already a question of like, is that allowed? But let's say someone says it's allowed. It's in the
experiment. See if you can pour it.
Yeah, I can pour it, but if it's into the solid stage of the tahina when I'm added some water, setting aside the lash question for now, going with the opinions that it's okay. So you've now made up your tahina, now it's solid. Now it's pretty solid. You can't pour it. At that point, it sounds like you could put the lemon on it.
Lemon juice, correct.
Lemon juice, yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Have a great week. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.